The thunder of hoofbeats echoed across the vast Montana prairie, as Zara Whitfield clutched her stomach and urged her exhausted mare faster, the pain of betrayal burning as fiercely as the secret growing within her. The year was 1878, and at 22, she was unmarried, carrying a child, and fleeing the only home she'd ever known with nothing but a small bundle of possessions and the crushing weight of her father's final words. "No daughter of mine carries a bastard under her roof." The setting sun cast long shadows across the rolling grasslands as Zara spotted the weathered sign for Silverhorn Creek. She'd heard tales of this frontier town, a place where people minded their business and asked few questions. Her trembling hands adjusted the reins as another wave of nausea swept through her. 3 months along, and already her dresses needed loosening, though thankfully her heavy coat concealed her condition from casual observers. "Just a little further, Penny," she whispered to the chestnut mare, patting its lathered neck. "We'll find somewhere to rest." The main street of Silverhorn Creek materialized before her, a dusty thoroughfare lined with wooden buildings, their windows glowing with lamplight against the approaching dusk. Saloon music drifted through the air, mingling with the sounds of conversation and the occasional burst of laughter. For a moment, Zara allowed herself to hope. Perhaps here, in this remote outpost of civilization, she could start anew. Her mare stumbled slightly, and Zara realized how close to exhaustion they both were. Spotting a modest livery stable at the edge of town, she directed Penny toward it, praying the stable master would be willing to board her horse for what little money she could spare. "Hello," she called out, her voice sounding thin and uncertain even to her own ears. "Is anyone here?" Movement from the shadowed interior caught her attention. A tall figure emerged, silhouetted against the amber glow of a lantern hanging from a post. The man stepped forward, and Zara found herself looking up at a face weathered by sun and wind, yet not unkind. He wore a faded bandana around his neck, his cotton shirt rolled up at the sleeves revealing strong forearms dusted with dark hair. "Stables Clausen for the night," he said, his deep voice carrying the distinct drawl of a man who'd spent his life in the West. His eyes, a startling shade of green, took in her appearance with a measured gaze that made her acutely self-conscious of her disheveled state. "Please," Zara said, struggling to dismount with dignity. "My horse needs care," and the world suddenly tilted beneath her feet as she slid from the saddle. Strong arms caught her before she could hit the ground, and she found herself pressed momentarily against a solid chest that smelled of leather and pine. "Whoa there," the man said, steadying her. "You all right, miss?" "Yes, I'm fine," she lied, trying to regain her composure. "Just tired from the journey." The man's eyes narrowed slightly as he took in her pale face and the way her hand instinctively moved to her abdomen. "Name's Griffin Callahan," he said after a moment. "Folks call me Griff." "Zara Whitfield," she replied, straightening her spine with what dignity she could muster. "I've come from Billings. I was hoping to find work and lodging in town." Griff Callahan's expression revealed nothing as he looked from her to the weary mare. "Not much work for a single woman in these parts, especially not this time of year." "I can sew, cook, clean," Zara said quickly. "I've worked as a teacher's assistant. I'm willing to do honest work, Mr. Callahan." A hint of something, perhaps respect, flickered in his eyes. "Town's got a boarding house run by Widow Pearson, but she's particular about who she takes in." He hesitated. "My sister Madeline owns the general store. She's been looking for help. Might be she'd have work for you." Hope fluttered in Zara's chest. "That would be most appreciated." Griff nodded, then turned his attention to Penny. "Your mare's in rough shape. Let me take care of her for you." He reached for the reins, his calloused hand brushing against Zara's fingers. The brief contact sent an unexpected jolt through her, and she withdrew her hand quickly. "I can pay," she said, reaching for the small purse tied at her waist. "We'll settle up later," Griff replied, already leading Penny toward a stall. "You look like you could use a hot meal and a proper bed more than I need payment tonight." Relief washed over Zara, followed quickly by wariness. She'd learned the hard way that men rarely offered kindness without expecting something in return. As if reading her thoughts, Griff added, "Silverhorn's small, Miss Whitfield. Folks help each other here because tomorrow it might be them needing the hand up." He secured Penny in a stall and began removing her saddle with practiced ease. "Wait here while I fetch my horse. I'll escort you to Madeline's. It's not proper for a lady to walk through town alone at this hour." Zara wanted to protest that she was hardly in a position to stand on propriety, but exhaustion had seeped into her bones. She nodded gratefully and sank onto a hay bale, watching as Griff moved with quiet efficiency around the stable. Minutes later, he emerged leading a magnificent black stallion. In the lantern light, with his tall frame atop the powerful horse, Griffin Callahan cut an imposing figure. He extended a hand down to her. "Come on, Miss Whitfield. Let's get you settled." Hesitantly, Zara placed her hand in his and allowed him to pull her up behind him. The intimacy of the position, her arms necessarily around his waist, her front pressed against his back, made her cheeks flush despite her fatigue. As they rode slowly down the main street, Zara felt the curious stares of townsfolk. A new face in a small frontier town always drew attention, and she knew her arrival with Griff Callahan would start tongues wagging by morning. "Ignore them," Griff said quietly over his shoulder, as if sensing her discomfort. "They'll find something new to gossip about soon enough." The general store sat at the corner of the main street and a smaller side road. A simple sign reading "Callahan's Mercantile" hung above the porch. Light spilled from the windows, and as they dismounted, the door opened to reveal a woman with the same striking green eyes as Griff, though her hair was a shade lighter than his dark brown. "Bringing me strays again, brother?" the woman asked, but her tone was warm and her smile genuine as she looked Zara over. "Madeline, this is Miss Zara Whitfield. She's looking for work and a place to stay," Griff said, helping Zara up the steps. "Miss Whitfield, my sister Madeline Ross. Pleased to meet you, Mrs. Ross," Zara said, summoning what little energy she had left for politeness. Madeline's keen eyes took in Zara's condition with one sweeping glance, and something like understanding passed over her features. "Come inside, dear. You look dead on your feet." Griff cleared his throat. "I'll leave her in your capable hands then. Got to finish up at the livery." "You'll join us for supper?" Madeline asked. "Not tonight. Promised Sheriff Tanner I'd help with night patrol." Madeline nodded, then gently guided Zara inside. As the door closed behind them, Zara heard the sound of hoofbeats as Griff rode away. The warmth of the store enveloped her, along with the comforting smell of coffee and baked goods. "You've had a long journey," Madeline said, not a question but a statement. "Yes," Zara replied simply. "And you're in trouble," Madeline added, her voice low but not unkind. Zara's hand went instinctively to her stomach. Yes," Madeline nodded as if confirming something to herself. "Well, Miss Whitfield, we all have our burdens to bear. I have a room above the store you're welcome to use, and if you're willing to work hard, I can offer you employment." She paused. "This town isn't perfect, but folks here mind their own business for the most part. Whatever you're running from, you might find peace here." Tears stung Zara's eyes at the unexpected kindness. "Thank you, Mrs. Ross. I don't know how to repay such generosity." "Madeline, please," the older woman said with a gentle smile. "And you can repay me by being honest. I don't need your whole story, but I won't abide lies in my home or business." Zara swallowed hard. "I'm carrying a child," she admitted, the words painful to speak aloud. "The father, he's not in the picture. My family disowned me." Madeline's expression softened further. "It takes courage to start over, especially in your condition. The room is yours for as long as you need it, and we'll sort out the rest as we go along." For the first time since discovering her pregnancy, Zara felt the tight knot of fear in her chest begin to loosen. Perhaps Silverhorn Creek could indeed be the fresh start she so desperately needed. Little did she know that Griffin Callahan, riding patrol under the vast Montana sky that night, was thinking of the vulnerable young woman with haunted eyes who carried a secret beneath her heart, and wondering why he felt so inexplicably drawn to protect her. Dawn broke over Silverhorn Creek, painting the modest buildings with golden light. Zara woke to the unfamiliar sounds of a town coming to life, wagon wheels creaking, distant cattle lowing, voices calling greetings. For a moment, disorientation gripped her, then the events of the previous day rushed back. She was in a small but clean room above Madeline Ross's general store, having fled her former life and the shame that accompanied her condition. She rose carefully, the now familiar nausea greeting her like an unwelcome companion. After dressing in one of her two remaining presentable dresses, a simple blue calico that still concealed her changing figure, Zara made her way downstairs to find Madeline already bustling about the store, arranging goods on shelves. "Good morning," Zara said hesitantly, still unsure of her place in this new arrangement. Madeline turned with a warm smile. "Good morning, Miss Whitfield. I trust you slept well." "Better than I have in weeks," Zara admitted. "And please call me Zara." "Zara it is, then." Madeline nodded toward a small table near the back of the store where coffee and a plate of biscuits awaited. "Have some breakfast. We open in half an hour, and I'll show you the ropes as we go." Gratefully, Zara took a seat and nibbled at a biscuit, hoping it would settle her stomach. The hot coffee helped clear the fog from her mind. "What will my duties entail?" she asked, eager to prove her worth. "Minding the counter, keeping inventory, helping customers find what they need," Madeline explained. "Nothing too taxing, though the days can be long sometimes. Most importantly, you'll need to learn what we stock and what our regulars typically order." The morning passed in a blur of introductions and instructions. Zara met a parade of townsfolk who eyed her with varying degrees of curiosity and warmth. Mrs. Thornton, the baker's wife, welcomed her effusively. Mr. Peterson, the blacksmith, merely grunted his acknowledgement. Two young women about Zara's age, sisters named Clara and Edith Thompson, peppered her with questions that Madeline deftly intercepted. By midday, Zara's head was spinning with names and faces, but she felt a small sense of accomplishment at having survived her first morning. When the lunch hour brought a lull in customers, Madeline insisted Zara sit and rest while she prepared sandwiches. "You're doing well," Madeline said, placing a plate before her. "Though you should eat more. You're feeding too now." Zara blushed, still unaccustomed to discussing her condition so openly. "I'm trying. The sickness makes it difficult sometimes." Madeline nodded sympathetically. "It will pass, usually by the 4th month. I remember when I was carrying my Thomas couldn't keep anything down for weeks." "You have a son?" Zara asked, realizing she knew little about her benefactor. A shadow passed over Madeline's face. "Had. He and my husband Daniel died 5 years ago." "Influenza." "I'm so sorry," Zara said, instantly regretting her question. Madeline squared her shoulders. "Life goes on even when we think it can't. That's what Griffin always says anyway." She smiled faintly. "My brother practically raised me after our parents died. then helped me rebuild my life after I lost Daniel and Thomas. He's a good man, though he'd scowl something fierce if he heard me say so." The bell above the door jingled, interrupting their conversation. Zara looked up to see Griffin Callahan himself entering the store, his tall frame filling the doorway. Sunlight caught the dust on his shoulders, and his dark hair was slightly disheveled beneath his hat. Their eyes met briefly before he turned his attention to his sister. "Maddie," he greeted, crossing to the counter. "Sheriff asked me to pick up some supplies." "Of course," Madeline replied. "The usual order." Griff nodded, then glanced at Zara again. "Miss Whitfield, you're looking better today." "Thank you, Mr. Callahan," Zara said, oddly flustered under his direct gaze. "And thank you again for your help yesterday." "Your mare's doing fine," he offered. "Gave her extra oats this morning." "That's very kind of you." An awkward silence fell between them until Madeline returned with a package wrapped in brown paper. "Here's the sheriff's order, and I've packed you some lunch since I know you probably haven't eaten." Griff accepted both with a nod of thanks. "Much obliged." He hesitated, then turned back to Zara. "Miss Whitfield, there's a social at the church this Sunday. Nothing fancy, just folks gathering after service for food and conversation. Might be a good way to meet more people in town if you're interested." Before Zara could respond, the bell jangled again, and a tall man with silver temples and a carefully groomed mustache entered the store. He wore an expensive-looking suit that seemed out of place in the frontier town. "Mr. Callahan," the newcomer said with a nod that barely disguised his disdain. "Madeline." His eyes landed on Zara with interest. "And who might this lovely young lady be?" Madeline's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Judge Davidson, this is Miss Zara Whitfield. She's helping me in the store. Zara, Judge William Davidson." Judge Davidson approached, extending his hand with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "A pleasure to make your acquaintance, Miss Whitfield. A new face is always welcome in our little community." Zara accepted his handshake reluctantly, noting how he held her hand a moment longer than was proper. "Thank you, sir." "Miss Whitfield just arrived yesterday," Griff said, his tone neutral but his posture suddenly tense. "Traveled all the way from Billings." "Is that so?" Davidson's eyebrows rose. "That's quite a journey for a young woman alone. What brings you to our humble Silverhorn Creek?" "A desire for change, sir," Zara replied carefully. "I've heard good things about the town." Davidson chuckled. "Well, we must ensure your stay is pleasant then. Perhaps you would do me the honor of allowing me to escort you to the social Mr. Callahan just mentioned." Zara felt trapped, aware of both men watching her response. Judge Davidson's attention made her deeply uncomfortable, yet rejecting him outright might create an enemy she couldn't afford. "That's very kind," she began diplomatically, "but Miss Whitfield has already agreed to accompany me and Madeline," Griff interrupted smoothly. "Being new to town and all." Surprise flickered across Zara's face, but she quickly composed herself. "Yes, Mr. Callahan and Mrs. Ross have been very welcoming." Davidson's smile hardened slightly. "I see. Another time, perhaps." He turned to Madeline. "I'll need a new ledger and some ink, if you please." While Madeline attended to the judge, Griff moved closer to Zara. "Sorry for speaking for you," he said quietly. Davidson can be persistent with new women in town, especially those without obvious protection. "I appreciate your concern, Mr. Callahan," Zara replied, equally softly, "but I don't need a guardian." A hint of a smile touched Griff's lips. "Never said you did, Miss Whitfield." "But allies can be useful in a new place." Before Zara could respond, Madeline returned with the judge's purchases. After paying, Davidson tipped his hat to the ladies, gave Griff a curt nod, and departed. "Important man in town?" Zara asked once he was gone. Owns the bank and half the businesses, Madeline explained. Fancies himself something of a kingpin in Silverhorn. And he's not used to hearing no, Griff added, especially from pretty women. Zara felt heat rise to her cheeks at the implied compliment. Well, thank you for the rescue, however unnecessary it might have been. Griff's eyes crinkled slightly at the corners. I'll remember that when I pick you up on Sunday. He touched the brim of his hat. Ladies. With that, he turned and strode out of the store, leaving Zara staring after him. My brother likes you, Madeline observed with a hint of amusement. He's just being kind, Zara protested. Madeline gave her a knowing look. Griffin doesn't invite just anyone to social gatherings. He usually avoids them himself. She began rearranging items on a nearby shelf. He's a good man, Zara. Better than most. I'm hardly in a position to think about such things, Zara said quietly, her hand drifting to her abdomen. Perhaps not, Madeline conceded, but life has a way of happening regardless of our plans. The afternoon brought a steady stream of customers, keeping both women busy until closing time. By evening, Zara was exhausted but satisfied with her first day's work. After helping Madeline close the store, they shared a simple supper upstairs. I should warn you, Madeline said as they ate, word of your arrival has already spread. People will be curious about you at the social. Zara sighed. I expected as much. Small towns are the same everywhere. You don't have to answer their questions, Madeline assured her. And if anyone steps out of line, Griffin will set them straight. Why is he going to such lengths to help me? Zara asked, the question that had been nagging at her all day finally finding voice. Madeline considered this. My brother has always had a protective streak, especially toward those he sees as vulnerable. But, she paused, choosing her words carefully. I haven't seen him take an interest in anyone since Sarah Pembroke left him at the altar 3 years ago. Zara nearly choked on her tea. Left him at the altar. That's terrible. Ran off with a traveling salesman the day before the wedding, Madeline confirmed. Griffin doesn't speak of it, but it changed him. He keeps to himself mostly, focuses on his work with the horses and helping Sheriff Tanner when needed. And you think he's interested in me? Romantically, Zara couldn't keep the disbelief from her voice. A pregnant, unwed stranger. I think he sees something in you that resonates with him, Madeline replied thoughtfully. Beyond that, who can say? Griffin's always been a man who knows his own mind. Later that night, as Zara prepared for bed, she found herself standing before the small mirror, studying her reflection. Her hand cradled the slight swell of her stomach, still easily concealed but growing more noticeable each day. How long before the townsfolk realized her condition? How would they treat her then? And how would Griffin Callahan react when he discovered the full truth of her situation? The baby kicked softly, a flutter so faint she might have imagined it. Zara closed her eyes, remembering the look in Griffin's green eyes when he'd stepped between her and Judge Davidson protective. Yes, but something more. Something that made her heart beat a little faster despite all her resolutions to guard it carefully. This is foolishness, she whispered to herself. You came here to start over, not to fall into the same trap. Yet as she lay in bed, watching moonlight filter through the thin curtains, Zara couldn't help but wonder what Sunday might bring. The week passed swiftly as Zara settled into the rhythm of life at Callahan's Mercantile. Each day brought new faces and a growing familiarity with the townsfolk of Silverhorn Creek. She learned which customers preferred friendly conversation and which wanted efficient service with minimal chatter. She discovered that Mr. Hollister, the town's only lawyer, always bought peppermint sticks for his grandchildren on Thursdays, and that Mrs. Benson from the dress shop would linger over the fabric bolts for an hour, but inevitably leave without purchasing anything. By Saturday, Zara felt almost comfortable in her new role. The morning sickness had eased somewhat, allowing her to eat more regularly, though she still tired easily. Madeline, observant and kind, ensured Zara took regular breaks and never lifted anything too heavy. Griffin Callahan had not returned to the store since Tuesday, though Zara occasionally caught glimpses of him riding through town or talking with Sheriff Tanner outside the jail. Once, their eyes met across the street, and he tipped his hat in acknowledgement, the simple gesture causing an inexplicable flutter in her chest. "Ridiculous," she murmured to herself as she arranged a display of canned goods Saturday afternoon. "You're imagining things that aren't there." "Talking to yourself is the first sign of trouble, or so my mother always said," came an amused voice from behind her. Zara turned to find a young woman about her own age, dressed in a simple but well-made blue dress, a friendly smile on her freckled face. "I'm Hannah Turner," the woman introduced herself. "Dr. Turner's wife. You must be Miss Whitfield." "Zara, please," she replied, taking an immediate liking to Hannah's open expression and warm eyes. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Turner." "Hannah," the other woman insisted. "I've been meaning to come by and introduce myself all week, but Robert's been run off his feet with patients." She leaned in conspiratorially. "Truth is, I've been desperate for someone new to talk to. Most of the women my age in town are either married with a house full of children or determined spinsters who think my medical textbooks will corrupt my feminine sensibilities." Zara couldn't help but laugh. "You read medical texts?" "Everyone I can get my hands on," Hannah confirmed without a hint of embarrassment. "Robert says I'd make a better doctor than half the men he studied with, but," she shrugged, "the world isn't ready for that yet." "That's admirable," Zara said sincerely, having such passion for knowledge. Hannah beamed. "I like you already, Zara Whitfield. Will you be at the social tomorrow? I could introduce you to some of the more tolerable residents of our fair town." "Yes, I'll be attending with Madeline and her brother, Griffin Callahan." Hannah's eyebrows rose with interest. "Well, that will set tongues wagging. Griffin hasn't escorted anyone to a town gathering since," she stopped herself. "Well, it's been a while." "We're not. He's just being kind to a newcomer," Zara clarified hastily. Hannah looked unconvinced. "If you say so." "Griffin Callahan isn't known for doing anything out of mere politeness." She glanced around the store. "Do you have a dress for tomorrow? Nothing fancy required, but something pretty." Zara hesitated. "I have a dress, but it's rather plain." "I have just the thing," Hannah declared. "A lovely green dress I've only worn twice. It would complement your coloring beautifully, and I think we're of a similar size." She paused, her eyes flickering briefly to Zara's midsection before meeting her gaze again with understanding. "It has a bit of room in the waist, too. Very comfortable." Heat flooded Zara's cheeks as she realized Hannah had guessed her condition. "I don't know what," Hannah touched her arm gently. "My husband is the only doctor for 20 miles, Zara. I assist him with his patients. I'm quite familiar with the signs and I can be discreet." Relief and apprehension warred within Zara. "Does everyone know?" "Not yet," Hannah assured her. "Most people are too self-absorbed to notice such things right away, but eventually." "Eventually they will," Zara finished quietly, "and when they do, you'll need friends," Hannah said firmly. "I'd like to be counted among them." Tears pricked at Zara's eyes, unexpected and unwelcome. She blinked them away, touched by the straightforward kindness. "I would appreciate that, Hannah." "Good. That's settled then. I'll bring the dress by this evening, and perhaps we can take a few moments to adjust it if needed." Hannah smiled warmly. Every woman deserves to feel beautiful, especially at a social where eligible bachelors might be watching. "I'm hardly in a position to attract a suitor," Zara pointed out. Hannah's expression turned thoughtful. Maybe not, but Griffin Callahan is known for making up his own mind about people, regardless of what others think. With a conspiratorial wink, she added, and he certainly hasn't been able to keep his eyes off you whenever you're in his line of sight. Before Zara could formulate a response to this startling observation, the bell over the door announced another customer, and Hannah took her leave with promises to return later with the dress. True to her word, Hannah appeared at closing time with the promised green dress carefully folded in brown paper. The two women retreated to Zara's room above the store, where Hannah helped her try on the garment. "It's perfect," Hannah declared, watching as Zara twirled hesitantly before the small mirror. "The color brings out your eyes and see how it drapes just so." She adjusted the fabric around Zara's waist. "No one will notice anything they shouldn't yet." The dress was indeed lovely, a soft sage green cotton with delicate embroidery at the collar and cuffs. The slightly higher waistline was fashionable while also concealing Zara's condition. "It's beautiful, Hannah. I can't accept—" "Nonsense. It suits you far better than me. Consider it a welcome gift." Hannah studied her handiwork with satisfaction. Griffin Callahan won't know what hit him. Despite her protests that Griffin's opinion was irrelevant, Zara felt a flutter of anticipation as she prepared for bed that night. The green dress hung carefully on the back of her door, a tangible reminder that tomorrow she would step out into Silverhorn society for the first time. Sunday dawned clear and mild, a perfect early autumn day. After a light breakfast, Zara helped Madeline prepare a basket of rolls for the social, then retreated upstairs to dress. She took extra care with her appearance, arranging her dark blonde hair in a simple but flattering style, secured with tortoiseshell combs that had belonged to her mother, one of the few keepsakes she'd managed to bring with her. The green dress fit perfectly, giving her a confidence she hadn't felt in months. As she descended the stairs to the store, Madeline's appreciative whistle made her blush. "My brother won't be able to take his eyes off you," Madeline said with a grin. "Hannah Turner has good taste." "It's just a borrowed dress," Zara demurred, though she couldn't help smoothing the fabric self-consciously. "It's more than that," Madeline countered. "You're standing taller today. Confidence becomes you, Zara." A knock at the store's front door interrupted their conversation. Madeline opened it to reveal Griffin Callahan, looking decidedly uncomfortable in clean dark trousers and a white shirt with an actual collar. His usual hat was missing, and his dark hair was neatly combed, though one stubborn lock fell across his forehead. The only familiar element was the worn leather vest he wore open over his shirt. "Ladies," he greeted, shifting slightly under their scrutiny. Ready for the social, his eyes found Zara, widening almost imperceptibly as he took in her appearance. Something flickered in their green depth: surprise, appreciation, and perhaps something warmer that made Zara's pulse quicken. "Miss Whitfield," he said, his voice a touch rougher than usual. "You look. That is, green suits you." "Thank you, Mr. Callahan," Zara replied, ridiculously pleased by his awkward compliment. "You look very handsome yourself." Griff tugged at his collar as if it were choking him. "Maddie insisted, said I couldn't escort two lovely ladies looking like I just come from the stables." "And she was right," Madeline said briskly, gathering her basket. "Now, shall we? Church will be starting soon." The walk to the small white church at the edge of town was short but significant for Zara. Walking between Madeline and Griffin, she felt curious eyes tracking their progress, whispers following in their wake. Griffin seemed oblivious to the attention, but Zara knew this public association with her new employers would cement her place in the town's gossip for days to come. The church was already filling when they arrived. Griff led them to a pew near the back, taking the aisle seat with Zara beside him and Madeline on her other side. As they settled, Zara spotted Hannah Turner across the aisle, who gave her an encouraging smile and a subtle thumbs up that nearly made Zara laugh out loud. Throughout the service, Zara was acutely aware of Griffin beside her. Their shoulders occasionally brushed when they rose for hymns, and once, when reaching for the hymnal they shared, their fingers touched briefly, sending an unexpected jolt through her. The sermon, delivered by a kindly, white-haired Reverend Mitchell, focused on the parable of the Good Samaritan, the virtue of helping strangers, and the importance of looking beyond appearances to see a person's true character. Zara wondered if the choice of topic was coincidental, or if word of her situation had somehow reached the Reverend's ears. After the service concluded, the congregation moved to the adjacent churchyard, where tables had been set up bearing an impressive array of food. Women bustled about arranging dishes, while men gathered in small groups, discussing cattle prices and weather predictions. Children darted between adults, their Sunday best already showing signs of energetic play. "Let me get you ladies some refreshments," Griff offered, clearly eager for an escape from the immediate press of socializing. As he walked away, Hannah appeared at Zara's elbow. "You look wonderful," she said warmly, "and the dress is perfect on you." "Thanks to you," Zara replied with genuine gratitude. "I feel almost like myself again." "Zara, I'd like you to meet my husband," Hannah said, turning to the tall, sandy-haired man beside her. "Robert, this is Zara Whitfield." Dr. Turner had kind eyes and a firm handshake. "A pleasure, Miss Whitfield. Hannah hasn't stopped talking about her new friend since yesterday." "Your wife has been extraordinarily kind to me," Zara said. Dr. Turner's eyes held the same knowing look that Hannah's had, professional assessment mixed with compassion. "If you ever need anything medical advice or otherwise, our door is always open." "Thank you," Zara said softly, understanding the offer extended beyond mere courtesy. The Turners moved on to greet other parishioners, and Zara found herself approached by a succession of curious townsfolk. Most were polite, if transparently inquisitive about her past. She navigated the questions with careful vagueness, explaining that she'd come west seeking new opportunities after losing her parents. It wasn't entirely a lie. Her mother had passed years ago, and her father had made it clear she was dead to him now. Griffin returned with plates of food and stood protectively at her side through several introductions, his presence both comforting and confusing. Why should this man she barely knew care about her comfort among strangers? They had just found a relatively quiet spot near a large oak tree when Judge Davidson approached, his smile too practiced to be genuine. "Miss Whitfield," he greeted, "you're looking enchanting today. Green is certainly your color." "Thank you, Judge Davidson," Zara replied politely. "I trust you're settling in well at Madeline's establishment," he continued, pointedly ignoring Griffin beside her. "Very well, thank you. Everyone has been most welcoming." Davidson nodded. "Silverhorn prides itself on hospitality, though I must say, a young woman of your obvious refinement might find more suitable employment than shop work." His gaze became more pointed. "I happen to be in need of a secretary to manage my correspondence." The position would offer considerably higher wages and more appropriate company. Before Zara could respond, Griffin spoke, his voice deceptively casual. "Miss Whitfield seems to be thriving at the Mercantile, Judge, and Maddie values her assistance greatly." Davidson's smile tightened. "I'm sure she does. However, I believe Miss Whitfield is capable of making her own decisions regarding her future." "Indeed I am," Zara interjected, finding her voice. "And I'm very content with my current position, Judge Davidson. Madeline has been extraordinarily generous." The offer remains open, Davidson said smoothly. Should you reconsider? With a curt nod to Griffin and a lingering glance at Zara, he moved away to join a group of the town's more prominent citizens. He's persistent, Zara observed quietly. Griffin's jaw tightened. Davidson tends to view people as possessions to be acquired, especially women who catch his interest. Do I detect a history between you two? Let's just say we have differing opinions on how people should be treated, Griffin replied evasively. Davidson believes money and position entitle him to whatever or whoever he wants. Zara shivered slightly despite the warm day. I'll keep that in mind. They were interrupted by the arrival of Sheriff Tanner, a weathered man in his 40s with observant eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. He greeted Griffin with easy familiarity before turning a curious gaze on Zara. "So you're the young lady who's got the town buzzing," he said without preamble. "Tanner. Sheriff. Pleased to meet you, Sheriff," Zara replied. "I hope my arrival hasn't caused any trouble for you." A hint of amusement crinkled the corners of his eyes. "Nothing a lawman can't handle, though I admit seeing Callahan here at a social is noteworthy enough to justify some chatter." Griffin shifted uncomfortably. "Just being neighborly, Frank." "Sure you are," the sheriff replied with obvious skepticism. To Zara, he added, "This one hasn't voluntarily attended a social function since I've been busy," Griffin interrupted firmly. "Miss Whitfield doesn't need to hear ancient history." Sheriff Tanner studied his friend for a moment, then shrugged. "Fair enough." He tipped his hat to Zara. "Welcome to Silverhorn, Miss Whitfield. If you need anything, my office is always open." As the afternoon progressed, Zara found herself relaxing somewhat. Hannah introduced her to several friendly women, including the cheerful Mrs. Thornton from the bakery and a quiet schoolteacher named Miss Emerson. Madeline kept a watchful eye from across the gathering, occasionally rescuing Zara from particularly persistent questioners. And through it all, Griffin Callahan remained a steady presence nearby, not hovering but somehow always available when she seemed overwhelmed or uncomfortable. His quiet attentiveness touched her in ways she hadn't expected. As the social began winding down, Griffin appeared at her side. "Would you care for a short walk?" he asked, gesturing toward a path that led away from the churchyard. "Might be nice to escape the noise for a bit." Zara hesitated only briefly before nodding. "That would be lovely." They strolled in companionable silence for several minutes, following a well-worn path that wound through a stand of cottonwood trees. The afternoon sun filtered through yellow-tinged leaves, dappling the ground with shifting patterns of light. "Thank you," Zara said finally. "For today." "For everything, really." Griffin glanced at her, his expression softening. "Nothing to thank me for. You're good for Maddie. She's been alone too long." "And you?" The question slipped out before Zara could stop it. He didn't answer immediately, his gaze fixed on the path ahead. "I manage fine on my own. Yet here you are, escorting a virtual stranger to a social event you clearly don't enjoy." That drew a reluctant smile from him. "Maybe the company makes it more bearable." They reached a small clearing where a fallen log provided a natural bench overlooking a shallow creek. Griffin gestured for her to sit, then settled beside her, leaving a respectful distance between them. "I've heard whispers," Zara said after a moment, "about you being jilted." Griffin stiffened slightly. "Small towns. I'm sorry if I've overstepped," he sighed, removing a piece of grass from between his fingers. "It was 3 years ago. Sarah and I were to be married. Day before the wedding, she ran off with a man selling lightning rods and patent medicines." His mouth twisted in a humorless smile. "Claimed he could show her the world beyond Silverhorn." "That must have been painful," Zara said softly. "It was. Not so much losing Sarah, we'd known each other since childhood, comfortable more than passionate, but the public nature of it. He shrugged. Everyone watching, pitying, made me realize how little I actually knew about what she wanted. "And what do you want, Mr. Callahan?" Zara asked, surprising herself with her boldness. Griffin turned to look at her fully, his green eyes intent. "Lately, I've been wondering that myself." He hesitated, then added more quietly, "And it's Griff, if you don't mind. Mr. Callahan was my father." "Griff," Zara repeated, liking the way it felt on her tongue. "And you should call me Zara." Something shifted in the air between them, a subtle change that made Zara acutely aware of his proximity, of the way sunlight caught in his dark hair, of the strong line of his jaw now relaxed in a half-smile. "Zara," he said, as if testing it, "it suits you. Unusual but strong. My mother chose it. It means radiance or flowering, depending on who you ask. Both seem fitting." Zara felt heat rise to her cheeks at the simple compliment. This was dangerous territory. She had no business feeling this flutter of attraction, this pull toward a man she barely knew, not in her condition, not with her past. As if sensing her sudden unease, Griffin stood. "We should head back before Maddie sends out a search party." Zara nodded, accepting his outstretched hand to help her up. The brief contact sent another jolt through her, and she quickly withdrew her fingers once standing. They walked back toward the church in silence, each lost in thought. As they neared the gathering, now noticeably smaller as families departed for home, Zara spoke again. "Thank you for sharing that with me about Sarah. I know it couldn't have been easy." Griffin nodded. "Seems only fair, given that everyone else in town probably already told you the story with considerably less accuracy." "True," Zara admitted with a small smile. "Mrs. Thornton mentioned something about Sarah running away with a traveling prince from Europe." That startled a genuine laugh from Griffin, the sound warm and unexpectedly delightful. "Well, that's a new one. Last I heard it was a circus performer." "People do love to embellish," Zara agreed, enjoying this glimpse of a less guarded Griffin Callahan. As they rejoined the remaining socializers, Madeline caught Zara's eye with a knowing look that made her blush again. Whatever was developing between her and Griffin, friendship, or something more complicated, it hadn't gone unnoticed. Later, as they walked home in the golden light of early evening, Zara found herself between the Callahan siblings once more, but something had shifted. A tentative connection had formed, fragile but undeniable. And for the first time since discovering her pregnancy, Zara allowed herself to wonder if perhaps her future in Silverhorn might hold more than just sanctuary from scandal. The thought was as terrifying as it was exhilarating. October brought cooler temperatures to Silverhorn Creek, as autumn settled fully upon the Montana territory. Leaves turned brilliant gold and crimson before falling to carpet the streets, and the distant mountains wore their first dusting of snow. In the 4 weeks since her arrival, Zara had established herself as a fixture at Callahan's Mercantile, earning respect from customers for her efficiency and Madeline's trust to manage the store alone when needed. Her condition, now approaching the 5th month, had become more difficult to conceal. Though her dresses had been cleverly altered by Hannah Turner to accommodate her growing figure, the telltale curve of her stomach was increasingly evident to observant eyes. Whispers followed her occasionally, but less than she'd feared. Madeline's open acceptance and Hannah's friendship provided a buffer against the worst of the gossip. Griffin Callahan had become a regular visitor to the store, often stopping by at closing time to escort Zara and Madeline home or bringing fresh vegetables from his small garden outside town. His attentions, while never inappropriate, were marked by a gentle consistency that Zara found both confusing and increasingly precious. One crisp Thursday afternoon, as Zara was arranging a display of preserves, the store bell jangled. She looked up with a welcoming smile that faltered slightly when she saw Judge Davidson entering, his usual immaculate attire complemented by an expensive new overcoat. "Miss Whitfield," he greeted with a slight bow. "You're looking well today." "Judge Davidson," Zara acknowledged politely. "What can I help you with?" Davidson wandered deeper into the store, ostensibly examining goods but clearly more interested in conversation. "I've been meaning to stop by and check on your welfare. You've been in Silverhorn for over a month now, I believe." "Yes, and I'm quite settled, thank you." Zara continued her work, hoping he would state his business and leave. "Indeed, though I can't help but notice your situation has become somewhat more evident." His gaze dropped pointedly to her midsection. Zara stiffened, one hand instinctively going to her stomach. "I'm not sure what you mean, sir." Davidson's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Come now, Miss Whitfield. We're both adults. Your condition is becoming rather obvious to anyone with eyes." Heat flooded Zara's face, not embarrassment but anger at his presumption. "My personal circumstances are not a matter for public discussion, Judge Davidson." "On the contrary," he replied smoothly, "a town like Silverhorn survives on propriety and good example. A young, unmarried woman in your condition presents a certain moral dilemma for the community." "I fail to see how my presence affects anyone else," Zara said, struggling to maintain her composure. Davidson moved closer, lowering his voice. "Let me be direct, Miss Whitfield. Your situation is precarious. When your condition becomes undeniable, you may find Silverhorn less welcoming than it's been thus far. Even Madeline Ross's protection has its limits." "Is that a threat, Judge Davidson?" Zara asked, her voice steady despite the chill that ran through her. "Merely an observation," he replied. "And an opportunity. My offer of employment still stands with certain adjustments. I have a small property outside town. Quiet, private. You could remain there until your inconvenience is resolved. I have connections who could arrange for the child to be placed with a suitable family afterward." Horror washed through Zara as his meaning became clear. "You want me to hide away and then give up my baby?" "I'm offering you a respectable future," Davidson said, as if explaining something simple to a child. "The alternative is raising an illegitimate child in a town that will never truly accept either of you, not to mention the financial hardship. A single woman with a child has limited prospects." "I appreciate your concern," Zara said coldly, "but I have no intention of hiding or giving up my child. Now, if you're not here to purchase anything, I have work to do." Davidson's expression hardened. "You're being foolish, Miss Whitfield. My offer won't remain open indefinitely." The store bell jangled again, and Zara had never been so relieved to see Griffin Callahan's tall figure fill the doorway. His expression darkened as he took in the scene before him. "Davidson," he acknowledged tersely. "Something I can help you with." The judge straightened, adjusting his coat with affected casualness. "Just having a friendly conversation with Miss Whitfield." "Didn't look particularly friendly from where I'm standing," Griffin observed, moving to position himself subtly between Zara and the judge. "That's because you have a habit of misinterpreting situations, Callahan," Davidson replied. "A failing that's cost you in the past, as I recall." Griffin's jaw tightened, but he maintained his composure. "If you're done shopping, Judge, I believe Miss Whitfield has other customers to attend to." For a tense moment, the two men stared at each other, an unspoken challenge hanging in the air. Finally, Davidson inclined his head slightly. "We'll continue our discussion another time, Miss Whitfield," he said. then turned and left the store, the bell jangling angrily behind him. Once he was gone, Griffin turned to Zara, concern evident in his eyes. "Are you all right? What did he want?" Zara's hands trembled slightly as she straightened items on the counter. "He was offering me a way to deal with my situation, as he called it." Griffin's expression darkened further. "What kind of way?" "The kind that involves hiding me away until the baby comes, then taking it from me," Zara replied, unable to keep the bitterness from her voice. A muscle jumped in Griffin's jaw. "That's not happening." "No," Zara agreed firmly. "It's not." They stood in silence for a moment, the air between them charged with shared indignation. Finally, Griffin spoke again, his voice gentler. "He's wrong, you know, about Silverhorn not accepting you." Zara gave him a skeptical look. "Is he?" "I've seen the way some people look at me," heard the whispers. "Some, maybe," Griffin conceded, "but not everyone. Not the people who matter." He hesitated, then added, "Not me." Something warm unfurled in Zara's chest at his words. "Thank you, Griff." He cleared his throat, suddenly awkward. "Actually, I came by for a reason. Wanted to ask if you'd join me for supper tonight, at my place." Surprise rendered Zara momentarily speechless. "Your place? Just the two of us?" "Maddie's invited too," he added hastily. "Nothing improper, I just thought." "Well, I caught a couple of trout this morning and they're better fresh. Plus, you haven't seen my cabin yet." The invitation touched Zara deeply. In the weeks since the social, Griffin had shown his interest in countless small ways, but this felt different, more intentional. "I'd like that very much," she said softly. Relief flickered across his face. "Good, that's good. I'll come by after closing to fetch you both." As promised, Griffin arrived at the store just as Zara and Madeline were locking up. The walk to his cabin took them along the creek that gave the town its name, following a well-worn path through stands of aspen now blazing gold in the afternoon light. Griff pointed out landmarks as they walked the spot where he'd caught the trout that morning, an old beaver dam that had survived 3 spring floods, the oak tree he'd fallen from as a boy trying to retrieve a kite. His cabin stood in a small clearing about a mile from town, a sturdy structure of hewn logs with a stone chimney from which smoke curled invitingly. A corral to one side housed several horses, including Zara's mare Penny, who nickered a greeting as they approached. "It's lovely," Zara said, taking in the peaceful setting. "So quiet compared to town." "That's why I built it out here," Griffin replied. "After our parents died, Maddie wanted to stay in town, close to the store. I needed more space." The interior of the cabin was simple but comfortable, a main room with a fireplace, a kitchen area, a small table with chairs, and 2 doors that presumably led to bedrooms. Everything was impeccably clean, if somewhat Spartan in decoration. "Don't look so surprised," Griffin said with a hint of amusement when he caught Zara's expression. "Did you expect a bachelor's pigsty?" "Perhaps not quite so tidy," Zara admitted. Madeline laughed. "Griffin's always been orderly. Even as a child, everything had its place." "Army habits," Griffin explained. 2 years of military discipline tends to stick with a man." This was news to Zara. "You were in the army after the war," he clarified. "Frontier duty mostly, nothing heroic." While Griffin prepared the fish, Zara helped Madeline set the table, noticing the care he'd taken with the meal preparations. Fresh bread sat cooling on the counter, alongside vegetables from his garden and a cobbler that Madeline confided he'd risen before dawn to bake. "He wants to impress you," she whispered when Griffin stepped outside to fetch more firewood. "I'm already impressed," Zara admitted. "I never expected." "A man who can cook and keep house," Madeline smiled. "Our mother insisted her children could care for themselves. Said she wouldn't raise helpless men or dependent women." "She sounds remarkable." She was. Madeline's expression turned wistful. You would have liked her, and she would have adored you. The meal proved delicious, the trout perfectly prepared with herbs and lemon. Conversation flowed easily, with Madeline sharing childhood stories that made Griffin alternately groan and laugh. After they'd finished the cobbler, Madeline made a show of yawning. I think I'll head back to town, she announced. Mrs. Peterson is coming by early tomorrow with her new baby for a christening outfit, and I need to sort through the lace we received last week. Griffin frowned. It's getting dark. I should walk you back. Nonsense, Madeline said firmly. I've walked this path 1,000 times. Besides, someone needs to clear up, and Zara shouldn't have to do it alone after you worked so hard to impress her with your culinary skills. Zara bit back a smile at Griffin's embarrassed expression. At least take my pistol, he insisted, retrieving a revolver from a drawer and checking it before handing it to his sister. If it makes you feel better, Madeline conceded, tucking the weapon into her pocket. With a meaningful glance between Zara and Griffin, she added, Don't rush back on my account, Zara. Griffin can escort you whenever you're ready. After Madeline left, an awkward silence descended. Griffin busied himself clearing the table while Zara dried the dishes he washed. You don't have to help, he said. You're a guest. I don't mind, Zara replied. It's nice, actually, domestic. He shot her a sidelong glance. Not what you expected from the town's reclusive horseman. I'm learning not to make assumptions about you, Griffin Callahan. His hand stilled in the wash basin. Good or bad? Decidedly good, she assured him with a smile. When the kitchen was tidy, Griffin led her to sit by the fireplace, where 2 comfortable chairs faced the dancing flames. For a while they sat in companionable silence, the crackling fire and occasional distant owl hoot the only sounds. Davidson was right about one thing, Zara said finally. My situation is precarious. Griffin turned to look at her, firelight painting his features in warm gold and shadow. How so? A single mother has few options in this world, Griff, especially one without family support. You have support here, he countered. Maddie adores you. Hannah Turner considers you a friend. Even old Mrs. Thornton saves her best biscuits for when you come in. Zara smiled faintly. Kind people, all of them. But kindness doesn't change the fact that my child will be born without a father, without a name. Griffin was quiet for a moment, staring into the fire. Can I ask about the father? When Zara tensed, he added quickly, You don't have to tell me if you don't want to. Zara considered deflecting the question, as she had with others who'd hinted at it. But something about Griffin, his straightforwardness, his lack of judgment, made her want to be honest. His name was Edward, she said quietly. Edward Harrington, the son of my father's business partner. We were unofficially engaged. My father approved of the match and was drawing up contracts. Griffin listened silently, his green eyes intent on her face. Edward was charming, educated, said all the right things. Zara's voice took on a bitter edge. When I told him about the baby, he claimed it couldn't be his, said I must have been with someone else. When I insisted there had been no one else, he laughed and said he wouldn't be trapped by a woman's deceit, her hands clenched in her lap. He left town the next day. My father. When he learned of my condition, he gave me a choice. Give up the baby or leave his house forever. So you left, Griffin concluded softly. Zara nodded. I couldn't give up my child. Not for my father's approval, not for security, not for anything. The child is fortunate to have such a mother, Griffin said, his voice rough with emotion. I don't know what kind of mother I'll be, Zara admitted. I'm terrified most days, but I know I'll love this baby with everything I am. Griffin leaned forward in his chair, his expression intense. Zara, I need to tell you something, ask you something, really. Her heart skipped a beat at his serious tone. Yes. Before he could continue, a frantic pounding at the door startled them both. Griffin rose quickly, hand going automatically to where a pistol would normally be holstered. Griffin. "Open up," came Sheriff Tanner's urgent voice. Griffin strode to the door and flung it open. The sheriff stood on the porch, breathing hard as if he'd run the entire way from town. "Frank, what's happened?" "It's Madeline," the sheriff said grimly. "She never made it back to town. Hannah Turner saw her heading toward the creek path, but she never arrived at the store. I've got men searching, but with night falling." Zara gasped, her hand going to her mouth as cold dread washed through her. Griffin's face hardened. "I'll get my gear. Did you bring horses?" "Two outside," Tanner confirmed. "Figured you'd want to join the search immediately." Griffin turned to Zara, conflict evident in his expression. "I need to go," she urged. "Find Madeline. I'll be fine here." He hesitated only a moment before nodding sharply. "Bar the door behind us. My spare pistol is in the top drawer beside my bed if you need it. I'll be back as soon as we find her." Within minutes, Griffin had gathered his weapons and a lantern, spoken quietly to the sheriff, and prepared to leave. At the door, he paused, looking back at Zara with an expression that made her breath catch. "What I was going to say earlier," he began. "It'll keep. But know this, you and your child will never be alone as long as I have breath in my body." Before Zara could respond, he was gone, the sound of galloping hooves fading into the night. She barred the door as instructed and stood in the suddenly too quiet cabin, arms wrapped protectively around her belly, praying for Madeline's safety and trying not to think about what Griffin had been about to ask her. The night stretched interminably as Zara paced Griffin's cabin, alternating between stoking the fire and peering anxiously out the windows into the darkness. Unwilling to rest in either of the bedrooms, she eventually settled in Griffin's chair by the fireplace, drawing a quilt around her shoulders. Despite her intention to stay alert, exhaustion eventually claimed her. She dozed fitfully, waking at every sound, real or imagined. When dawn's first light began filtering through the windows, she rose stiffly and put coffee on to boil, hoping Griffin would return with good news. The coffee was just beginning to percolate when hoofbeats approached the cabin. Zara rushed to the window, relief flooding through her at the sight of Griffin dismounting from his horse. The relief turned to concern as she noted his haggard appearance and the grim set of his mouth. She unbarred the door before he could knock. "Did you find her?" Griffin removed his hat, revealing hair damp with morning dew and eyes shadowed with fatigue and worry. "Not yet. Search parties are still out. Frank sent me back to get some rest and supplies." "Come in, sit," Zara urged, leading him to the table. "I've made coffee." He sank into a chair, exhaustion evident in every line of his body. "Thank you." Zara poured the steaming coffee into a mug and placed it before him, then busied herself preparing a simple breakfast from the supplies in his kitchen. "Tell me what happened," she said as she worked. Griffin wrapped his hands around the mug, drawing warmth from it. "We found signs of a struggle near the bend in the creek path, about halfway between here and town. Madeline's shawl was there, and—" He swallowed hard, "and some blood on the rocks." Zara's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh, Griff, not much blood," he hastened to add. "Could be from a minor injury." There were boot prints at least 2 men based on the sizes and depth. They led toward the eastern hills. "Who would do such a thing?" Zara asked, setting a plate of eggs and bread before him. "Madeline is beloved in town." Griffin's expression darkened. "I have my suspicions." "Davidson." The name slipped out before Zara could stop it. His eyes shot to hers, sharp despite his fatigue. "Why would you say that?" Zara sank into the chair opposite him. "The timing after his confrontation at the store, and the way he threatened me not directly, but the implication was clear. Griffin pushed his plate away, appetite forgotten. What exactly did he say to you, Zara? Word for word, if you can remember. She recounted the conversation as precisely as she could, watching Griffin's expression grow harder with each detail. "Son of a bitch," he muttered when she finished. "Using Maddie to get to you. You really think he'd go that far?" Davidson's wanted control of Maddie's store property for years. It sits on the best corner in town, and she's refused every offer. Taking her would serve two purposes: pressure you and force her hand on the property. Griffin stood abruptly. "I need to talk to Frank." "Let me come with you," Zara said, rising as well. Griffin shook his head. "Too dangerous. If Davidson is behind this, you could be a target too." "All the more reason I shouldn't be left alone," Zara argued. "Besides, I can't just sit here while Madeline is in danger, not when it might be my fault." "This isn't your fault," Griffin said firmly, moving to stand before her. "None of it." "Please, Griff," she said softly. "I'll go crazy waiting here alone." He studied her face for a long moment, then nodded reluctantly. "Stay close to me at all times. If I tell you to get to safety, you do it without question. Understood?" "Understood." They rode double on Griffin's horse, Zara seated in front of him with his arms around her to hold the reins. Despite the dire circumstances, she couldn't help but be aware of his solid presence at her back, the way his breath stirred the hair near her ear, the careful way his arms cradled her body without pressing against her growing belly. Silverhorn Creek was buzzing with activity when they arrived. Groups of men gathered on the main street, some armed with rifles, others with lanterns and ropes. Sheriff Tanner stood on the steps of his office, organizing search parties. "Anything?" Griffin asked as they approached. Tanner shook his head grimly. "Nothing concrete. We've been searching the eastern hills since you left, but the terrain's rough and there are dozens of old mining shacks and caves where they could be hiding. We need to focus on Davidson," Griffin said in a low voice, dismounting and helping Zara down. "This has his stink all over it." The sheriff's eyes narrowed. "That's a serious accusation against the most powerful man in town, Griff. I need more than your gut feeling." "Then let me search his property outside town," Griffin pressed. "The one he keeps so private." Tanner hesitated. "Without evidence, I can't authorize that. Davidson would have us all in front of a territorial judge for trespassing. While we stand here debating legalities, my sister could be dying," Griffin said, his voice tight with barely controlled emotion. "I understand your frustration," Tanner replied, "but we have to proceed carefully." "I may be able to help," came a new voice. They turned to find Hannah Turner approaching, her husband beside her. "I saw something last night that might be relevant." "What did you see?" Griffin asked intently. Hannah glanced around, then lowered her voice. "After I saw Madeline heading toward the creek path, I noticed Judge Davidson's carriage leaving town in a hurry. Thomas Wilkes was driving, you know, that rough character who does odd jobs for the judge. There was someone else with him I didn't recognize." "Which direction were they headed?" Sheriff Tanner asked, suddenly alert. "East toward the judge's property," Hannah confirmed. Griffin turned to Tanner, a challenge in his eyes. "Is that enough for you?" The sheriff considered for a moment, then nodded sharply. "I'll gather a small group. We'll check out Davidson's property, but quietly. If Madeline is there, we don't want to spook them into doing something rash." "I'm coming with you," Griffin stated flatly. "So am I," Dr. Turner added. "If Madeline's injured, she'll need immediate attention." Sheriff Tanner nodded his agreement, then turned to Zara. "Miss Whitfield, you should stay in town where it's safe." Before Zara could protest, Hannah interjected. "She can stay with me at our house. It's the safest place for her right now." Griffin caught Zara's eye, his expression conflicted. "Please," he said quietly. I need to know you're safe while I find Madeline." Recognizing the genuine concern in his eyes, Zara nodded reluctantly. "Be careful, Griff." "Always am," he replied with a ghost of a smile. Then, to everyone's surprise, including perhaps his own, he leaned forward and pressed a swift, gentle kiss to her forehead. "I'll bring her back," he promised. As Griffin, the sheriff, and Dr. Turner hurried away to gather men and supplies for their mission, Hannah linked her arm through Zara's. "Come on, let's get you somewhere you can rest. You look exhausted." "I can't rest," Zara protested weakly. "Not until they're back safely." "The baby needs you to rest," Hannah reminded her gently. "And Griffin needs to focus on finding Madeline without worrying about you." Recognizing the wisdom in her friend's words, Zara allowed herself to be led to the Turner home. Inside the cozy doctor's residence, Hannah prepared tea and insisted Zara lie down on the sofa while they waited for news. "That man is in love with you," Hannah observed matter-of-factly as she handed Zara a steaming cup. Zara nearly choked on her first sip. "Don't be ridiculous. He's concerned for his sister and feels responsible for me as a friend." Hannah raised an eyebrow. "Friends don't look at each other the way Griffin Callahan looks at you, and they certainly don't kiss foreheads in the middle of a crisis in front of half the town." "He was just. It didn't mean anything," Zara stammered, though her heart fluttered at the memory of Griffin's gentle gesture. "If you say so," Hannah replied, clearly unconvinced. After a pause, she added more seriously, "What will you do, Zara, if he does have feelings for you?" It was the question Zara had been avoiding asking herself, despite the growing evidence of Griffin's interest. "I don't know," she admitted. "My situation is complicated enough without adding romantic entanglements." "Love is always complicated," Hannah said with a small smile. "That doesn't mean it isn't worth pursuing." "I'm carrying another man's child," Zara pointed out. "What kind of man would want to take that on?" "A man like Griffin Callahan," Hannah replied simply. "A man who sees beyond conventions to what really matters." Before Zara could respond, a commotion outside drew their attention. Hannah hurried to the window. "They're back," she exclaimed, "and they have Madeline." Zara struggled to her feet, ignoring Hannah's protests, and rushed outside just in time to see a procession of riders entering town. Griffin rode at the front, his sister cradled before him on his horse. Madeline was conscious but clearly battered, her face bruised and a makeshift bandage wrapped around her left arm. Dr. Turner rode alongside them, already issuing instructions to prepare his examination room. Sheriff Tanner followed with 3 deputies, and between them rode 2 bound men, Thomas Wilkes and another rough-looking character Zara didn't recognize. Of Judge Davidson, there was no sign. As the group reached the doctor's house, Griffin carefully dismounted, then lifted Madeline down with gentle hands. His eyes found Zara immediately, relief washing over his face at seeing her safe. "Get her inside," Dr. Turner directed, dismounting quickly. "Hannah, I'll need hot water and the medicine chest." Griffin carried Madeline into the house, Zara and Hannah following close behind. Once in the examination room, he reluctantly relinquished his sister to Dr. Turner's care. "I'll be right outside, Maddie," he promised, squeezing her hand before stepping out to allow the doctor to work. In the hallway, Zara reached for Griffin's arm, steadying him as the adrenaline that had sustained him began to ebb. "What happened? Is she going to be all right?" Griffin leaned heavily against the wall, exhaustion evident in every line of his body. "Robert says she'll recover. Broken arm, bruises, some cuts, His voice caught. "They roughed her up, but nothing worse. Thank God." "And Davidson?" Zara asked quietly. Griffin's expression hardened. "Gone. His men claim he paid them to abduct Madeline and hold her at his property while he left town on business. They were supposed to force her to sign over the store deed. But why now? He's wanted that property for years, according to you. You, Griffin said simply. Davidson wanted leverage over you. He figured with Madeline in danger, you'd accept his offer to keep her safe. Horror washed through Zara. This is my fault, she whispered. No, Griffin said firmly, taking her shoulders in his hands. This is Davidson's fault, no one else's. He's a man used to getting what he wants, no matter the cost. The examination room door opened, and Hannah emerged with a reassuring smile. She's asking for you both. Inside, Madeline lay on the examination table, her arm now properly splinted and her visible injuries cleaned. Despite the bruises marring her face, she managed a weak smile as Griffin and Zara approached. You two look worse than I feel, she quipped. Griffin took her hand carefully. You scared the life out of me, Maddie. Wasn't my plan, she replied dryly. Those bastards jumped me on the path. I got a shot off with your pistol, but there were two of them. Davidson? Zara asked softly. Madeline's expression darkened. He was there at the cabin, kept talking about how this was all for the greater good of Silverhorn. Said once I signed over the store and you accepted his protection, everything would be as it should be. Griffin's jaw tightened. Sheriff Tanner's put out notices to all surrounding towns. Davidson won't get far. I don't care about him right now, Madeline said wearily. I just want to go home. Dr. Turner returned, wiping his hands on a clean towel. You can take her home, Griffin, but she needs complete rest for at least a week. That arm will take 6 weeks to heal properly. I'll take care of her, Griffin promised. We both will, Zara added firmly. The journey back to the store apartment was slow and careful. Sheriff Tanner provided his buggy to transport Madeline, with Griffin driving and Zara sitting beside the injured woman, supporting her against the jolts of the road. Once they had Madeline settled in her bed, with medicines for pain and instructions for care, Griffin pulled Zara into the small sitting room. You should get some rest too, he said, noting the shadows under her eyes. It's been a long night for everyone. I will, she promised. But first, tell me what you were going to say last night before the sheriff arrived. Griffin rubbed a hand across his face, suddenly looking uncertain. Now might not be the best time with everything that's happened. Please, Zara urged softly. After all this, I think we both know how precious time can be. He studied her face for a long moment, then took a deep breath. I was going to ask if you would consider marrying me. Though she had half expected it, the words still took Zara's breath away. Griff, let me finish, he said quickly. I know it's sudden. I know your heart may still be healing from what that bastard Edward did to you, but I want you to know that I care for you, Zara, more than I thought possible after Sarah. His green eyes held hers, earnest and vulnerable. I would be a father to your child. A good one, I promise you that. And I would be a husband who respects you, who values your independence and strength. Tears welled in Zara's eyes. Why? She whispered. Why would you want to take on another man's child and a woman with such a damaged reputation? Griffin stepped closer, tentatively taking her hands in his. Because when I look at you, I see a woman of incredible courage. Because the thought of you and your child facing this world alone makes my heart ache. Because when I'm with you, I feel more alive than I have in years. A tear slipped down Zara's cheek. It's not that simple, Griff. It could be, he said gently, if we want it to be. And what about the town, the gossip? Let them talk, Griffin said firmly. The people who matter already accept you. As for the rest, we'll face them together. Zara's heart pounded in her chest, hope and fear warring within her. I need time, Griff. This is all so much to take in. He nodded, disappointment flickering in his eyes but quickly masked. Of course. I shouldn't have pressed you, especially after everything that's happened. He released her hands and stepped back. Take all the time you need. My offer stands regardless of your answer. Thank you, Zara said softly. Not just for this, but for everything. For finding Madeline, for making me feel safe, for... She gestured helplessly. For seeing me as more than my mistakes. Griffin's expression softened. Your child isn't a mistake, Zara, and neither is anything that's happened between us. Before she could respond, a soft call came from Madeline's bedroom. Griffin glanced toward the sound, then back at Zara. Get some rest. I'll sit with her for a while. As he disappeared into Madeline's room, Zara stood alone in the sitting area, one hand pressed to her racing heart, the other cradling her swollen belly where her child, their child, perhaps, if she accepted Griffin's proposal, had just delivered a strong kick, as if weighing in on the momentous decision before her. November arrived with biting winds and the promise of an early winter. 2 weeks after Madeline's rescue, life in Silverhorn Creek had settled into a new normal. Judge Davidson remained at large, though Sheriff Tanner had received word he'd been spotted heading east, presumably fleeing territorial justice. His accomplices, facing prison sentences for kidnapping and assault, had revealed little beyond what was already known, that Davidson had plotted to force Madeline's cooperation and pressure Zara into accepting his protection. Madeline was recovering steadily, though her broken arm limited her activities considerably. Zara had moved temporarily into the spare room of the store apartment to help care for her, an arrangement that placed her in daily proximity to Griffin, who visited morning and evening to check on his sister. Their interaction since his proposal had been careful, almost formal at times. True to his word, Griffin had not pressed Zara for an answer, though she occasionally caught him watching her with an expression of such naked longing that it made her heart ache. She found herself increasingly drawn to him, his quiet strength, his gentle handling of Madeline, the way his rare smiles transformed his serious face into something breathtaking. One crisp afternoon, as Zara minded the store counter, Hannah Turner arrived with a basket over her arm and determination in her step. "I'm staging an intervention," she announced without preamble. Zara raised an eyebrow. "I beg your pardon." "You and Griffin," Hannah elaborated, setting her basket on the counter. "This painful dance you two are doing around each other has gone on long enough." Heat rose to Zara's cheeks. "I don't know what you mean." "Yes, you do," Hannah countered. "He asked you to marry him, and you've been avoiding giving him an answer for 2 weeks while mooning over him like a lovesick schoolgirl." "I have not been mooning," Zara protested weakly. Hannah gave her a knowing look. "You sigh whenever he enters a room. Yesterday, I watched you fold the same shirt 3 times because you were distracted watching him chop wood." Zara buried her face in her hands. "Is it that obvious?" "To everyone except Griffin, apparently," Hannah replied, softening her tone. "He thinks you're trying to find a kind way to reject him." "That's not it at all," Zara said, looking up. "I just needed time to be sure, for both our sakes." "And are you sure now?" Zara placed a hand on her swollen belly, now prominently visible at 6 months along. "I think I am." "But it's complicated, Hannah." "My child will have a father who adores them," Hannah interrupted firmly. "Anyone with eyes can see Griffin is already committed to this baby. He spent 3 hours yesterday reinforcing the railings on the store stairs because, and I quote, 'babies are curious and stairs are dangerous.'" A smile tugged at Zara's lips. "He did? MMHMM. And he's been asking Robert about what expectant mothers need, what's normal in pregnancy, how to prepare for birth. He's planning for a future with you both, Zara. The question is, are you brave enough to take it?" Before Zara could respond, the store bell jangled. They looked up to see Griffin himself entering, snowflakes dusting his shoulders and hat. He stopped short at the sight of them, clearly sensing he'd interrupted something. "Sorry," he said, starting to back toward the door. "I can come back later." "No need," Hannah said brightly, gathering her basket. "I was just leaving. Remember what I said, Zara." With a meaningful glance between them, she departed, the bell jingling in her wake. An awkward silence filled the store as Griffin removed his hat, brushing snow from the brim. "Bad timing?" he asked. "No," Zara assured him. "Hannah was just being Hannah." A hint of a smile touched his lips, forthright to a fault, something like that. Zara moved from behind the counter, suddenly needing to close the distance between them. "How's Madeline today?" "Restless." "Complaining about the splint. Robert says that's a good sign." Griffin's eyes tracked her movement, a question in their green depths. "And you, how are you feeling?" "Better," Zara said honestly. "The sickness has passed completely. The baby's very active now." She hesitated, then added, "Would you like to feel? If that's not too forward." Surprise and something like wonder crossed Griffin's face. "I'd be honored." Zara took his hand, calloused from work but surprisingly gentle, and placed it against the side of her belly where the baby had been kicking. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, as if on cue, a strong movement pressed against his palm. Griffin's sharp intake of breath was followed by a smile of such pure joy that Zara felt tears spring to her eyes. "That's amazing," he whispered. "Hello there, little one." The baby kicked again, as if responding to his voice, and Griffin laughed softly. The sound wrapped around Zara's heart, and in that moment her decision crystallized with perfect clarity. "Yes," she said. Griffin looked up from her belly, confusion crossing his features. "Yes." "Yes, I'll marry you," Zara clarified, her voice steady despite the emotional tremor running through her. "If you still want me." For a heartbeat, Griffin stood perfectly still, processing her words. Then his free hand, the one not still pressed to her belly, came up to cup her cheek with exquisite tenderness. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. "I don't want you to feel pressured or obligated." "I've never been more sure of anything," Zara replied, covering his hand with hers. "These past months, you've shown me what a good man truly is, Griff. You've cared for me, protected me, respected me. You've offered a home to my child without hesitation or resentment." "How could I not love you for that?" Griffin's eyes widened at her declaration. "You love me." Zara smiled through the tears now flowing freely. "I do. I think I have for weeks now, but I was too afraid to admit it, even to myself. Too afraid of being hurt again, of trusting again." "Oh, Zara," Griffin murmured, his thumb gently wiping a tear from her cheek. "I love you too, more than I thought possible." "Then ask me again," she whispered. "Properly this time." Understanding bloomed in Griffin's eyes. Slowly, reverently, he knelt before her, still holding her hand in his. "Zara Whitfield, will you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife? Of allowing me to be a father to your child and a husband who cherishes you all the days of our lives?" "Yes," Zara said through happy tears. "Yes, I will marry you, Griffin Callahan." Griffin rose to his feet and, with a gentleness that belied his strength, drew her into his arms. His lips found hers in a kiss that spoke of promise, of homecoming, of a future neither had dared to imagine just months before. Zara melted into him, returning his kiss with all the love that had blossomed in her heart. The baby kicked again, pressed between them as if joining in their joy, and they broke apart with breathless laughter. "I think someone approves," Griffin said, his smile brighter than Zara had ever seen it. "Of course they do," Zara replied. "They're getting the best father a child could ask for." Griffin's expression turned serious. "I promise you, Zara, I will love this child as my own. No one will ever know the difference." "I know you will," she said softly. "That's why I love you." He kissed her again, briefly but with feeling. "When?" he asked when they parted. "How soon can I make you my wife?" "As soon as possible," Zara answered without hesitation. "Before the baby comes, I want our child born with your name." "Next week," Griffin suggested eagerly. Reverend Mitchell could perform the ceremony. "Nothing fancy, just family and close friends." Zara laughed at his enthusiasm. "Next week it is. Madeline will be beside herself with joy." "We should tell her right away," Griffin realized. "She's upstairs pretending to rest while actually reorganizing her mending basket for the third time today." Hand in hand, they climbed the stairs to Madeline's apartment, where they found her exactly as Griffin had predicted, sitting up in bed with sewing items spread around her. "Finally," she exclaimed when they shared their news. "I was beginning to think I'd have to lock you two in the storeroom to get you to admit your feelings." Griffin rolled his eyes, but his smile never dimmed. "Your support is touching, Maddie." "You know I approve wholeheartedly," Madeline said more seriously, reaching for Zara's hand. "You've been family in my heart for weeks now. This just makes it official." Plans for the wedding came together quickly. Reverend Mitchell agreed to perform the ceremony the following Saturday at the church. Hannah Turner appointed herself wedding coordinator, while Mrs. Thornton insisted on baking the cake as her gift to the couple. Word spread through Silverhorn Creek with typical small-town efficiency, and to Zara's surprise, the response was overwhelmingly positive. "Told you the town would accept you," Griffin said as they sat together on the porch of his cabin the evening before their wedding. Zara had come with Madeline to help move some of her belongings, as she would be living at the cabin after the ceremony. "I still can't quite believe it," Zara admitted, watching the sunset paint the distant mountains in hues of gold and pink. "A few months ago, I arrived here desperate and alone. Now I'm about to have a husband, a sister-in-law, friends. A home," Griffin added softly, his arm warm around her shoulders. "That's what I want to give you most of all, Zara. A place where you and our child will always feel safe and loved." Zara leaned into his embrace, savoring the solid strength of him. "You already have." The wedding day dawned clear and cold, with fresh snow blanketing Silverhorn Creek in pristine white. In the small room above Callahan's mercantile, Hannah Turner and Madeline Ross helped Zara prepare for her wedding. "Something borrowed," Hannah said, fastening a delicate pearl necklace around Zara's throat. "These were my grandmother's." "And something blue," Madeline added, presenting a blue satin ribbon to weave through Zara's upswept hair. "Griffin's mother wore this on her wedding day. He wanted you to have it." Tears threatened to ruin the careful work they'd done on Zara's face. "You're both too kind." "Nonsense," Madeline said briskly, though her own eyes were suspiciously bright. "You're making my brother happier than I've ever seen him. That's worth more than any ribbon." Zara wore a simple cream-colored dress that Hannah had helped modify to accommodate her pregnancy with dignity. At nearly 7 months along, her condition was unmistakable, but as she studied her reflection in the mirror, she saw not shame but a radiant bride, glowing with health and happiness. "Griffin won't be able to speak when he sees you," Hannah declared, adjusting the modest veil they'd fashioned. A knock at the door heralded Sheriff Tanner, who had offered to escort Zara down the aisle in the absence of her father. "Ladies," he greeted, his usually gruff demeanor softened by the occasion. "It's time." The small church was filled to capacity with townspeople. As the simple wedding march began, played on the church's old piano by Miss Emerson, Zara took the sheriff's arm and began the walk that would change her life forever. At the altar stood Griffin Callahan, more handsome than Zara had ever seen him in a new suit that Madeline had secretly ordered from Helena. His eyes found Zara's the moment she appeared in the doorway, and the naked adoration in his gaze nearly stopped her heart. The ceremony itself passed in a blur of emotion. Reverend Mitchell spoke of love's resilience, of new beginnings, of families created through choice as well as blood. When it came time for their vows, Griffin's voice rang clear and true through the church. I, Griffin James Callahan, take you, Zara Elizabeth Whitfield, to be my lawfully wedded wife. I promise to love, honor, and cherish you in sickness and in health, in good times and bad, for as long as we both shall live. I promise to be a father to your child, to love them as my own flesh and blood, to protect and guide them with all my strength. This is my solemn vow. Tears streamed unchecked down Zara's face as she repeated her own vows, her voice trembling but determined. When Griffin slipped a simple gold band onto her finger, his mother's, Madeline had explained earlier, Zara felt as though her heart might burst with joy. By the power vested in me, Reverend Mitchell concluded with a warm smile, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Griffin, you may kiss your bride. Griffin's hands, so strong yet always gentle with her, cradled her face as if she were made of precious glass. His lips met hers in a kiss that sealed their promises, tender yet filled with passion that promised so much more. The church erupted in applause and cheers, led enthusiastically by Hannah Turner. The celebration afterward, held in the church hall, was simple but joyous. Mrs. Thornton's cake proved as delicious as it was beautiful. Toasts were offered by Sheriff Tanner, Dr. Turner, and finally Madeline, whose emotional words about finding family in unexpected places left hardly a dry eye in the room. As the afternoon waned, Griffin leaned close to his new wife. Ready to go home, Mrs. Callahan, he murmured, the sound of her new name sending a pleasant shiver through Zara. More than ready, she replied softly. They departed amid a shower of rice and well wishes, climbing into Griffin's wagon for the short journey to the cabin that was now their home. Snow had begun to fall again, adding a magical quality to the twilight landscape. At the cabin door, Griffin surprised Zara by sweeping her into his arms. Tradition, he explained with a grin, carefully carrying her over the threshold. Inside, Zara gasped in delight. The main room had been transformed since her last visit. A cheerful fire burned in the fireplace, and beside it sat a rocking chair with a handmade quilt draped over the back. Fresh curtains hung at the windows, Madeline's handiwork, Zara suspected, and a vase of winter greenery adorned the table set for two. When did you do all this? She asked, turning to her husband in wonder. I had help, Griffin admitted. Hannah, Madeline, even Frank Tanner pitched in. I wanted it to feel like home for you from the first moment. It's perfect, Zara said, tears threatening again. Absolutely perfect. Griffin's expression turned serious as he took her hands in his. There's one more thing I want to show you. He led her to one of the doors off the main room, the one she knew led to the smaller of the two bedrooms. Inside, Zara found a nursery, simply but lovingly furnished with a hand-crafted cradle, a small chest of drawers, and a second rocking chair beside a window overlooking the creek. Griff, she breathed, overwhelmed by the tangible evidence of his commitment to her child. I made the cradle, he said, a hint of uncertainty in his voice. If you don't like anything, we can change it. I just wanted you to know that I meant every word of my vows. This baby is ours, Zara. Ours to love, ours to raise. Zara turned to her husband, her heart so full she could barely speak. I love you, Griffin Callahan, more than I can ever express. He drew her into his arms, holding her as if she were the most precious thing in his world. And I love you, Zara Callahan. You and our child with everything I am. As the snow fell gently outside and the fire crackled in the hearth, Zara knew she had found what she'd never dared to hope for when she fled Billings all those months ago, not just sanctuary, not just acceptance, but a love that saw her completely and cherished her anyway. A love that claimed her and her unborn child as its own, without reservation or condition. In Griffin's arms, she was finally, truly home. Spring came early to Montana in 1879, melting the last of winter's snow and bringing new life to Silverhorn Creek. In the Callahan cabin beside the creek, another new life was about to make its entrance into the world. "That's it, Zara. You're doing wonderfully," Dr. Turner encouraged, his calm voice a stark contrast to the tension in the room. "Just a little more now." Zara gripped Griffin's hand with strength born of pain and determination. She'd been in labor since the previous evening, and exhaustion threatened to overwhelm her. Only Griffin's steadfast presence kept her focused. "You can do this, sweetheart," he murmured, wiping her forehead with a cool cloth. "You're the strongest woman I've ever known." Hannah Turner moved efficiently around the bedroom they'd prepared for the birth, bringing fresh towels and hot water as needed. Madeline waited anxiously in the main room, her arm long healed but her nerves frayed with worry for her sister-in-law. Another contraction seized Zara, and she bore down with a cry that tore at Griffin's heart. He'd never felt so helpless, so utterly useless in the face of her pain. "I see the head," Dr. Turner announced. "One more good push, Zara." Summoning her last reserves of strength, Zara pushed with everything she had. A moment of searing pain, a strange sliding sensation, and then the most beautiful sound Griffin had ever heard, a healthy newborn cry, filled the room. "It's a girl," Dr. Turner said, his professional demeanor softening as he held up the squalling infant. "A perfect little girl." Tears streamed down Zara's face as the doctor placed the swaddled bundle on her chest. "Hello, my darling," she whispered. "We've been waiting for you." Griffin stared in awe at the tiny red face, the delicate fingers curling and uncurling, the shock of dark hair plastered to the baby's head. His daughter. Not by blood, perhaps, but by every measure that truly mattered. "She's beautiful," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Just like her mother." Zara looked up at him, love and exhaustion mingling in her eyes. "Would you like to hold her?" With hands that trembled slightly, Griffin took the newborn from his wife, cradling her with the reverence of a man receiving a miracle. The baby quieted in his arms, her eyes a deep, unfocused blue seeming to study his face. "Hello, little one," he murmured. "I'm your pa." The simple words, spoken with such certainty, such love, brought fresh tears to Zara's eyes. This was what she'd hoped for but scarcely dared to believe possible, a man who claimed her child as his own without hesitation or resentment. "Have you decided on a name?" Hannah asked softly, reluctant to intrude on the intimate family moment. Zara and Griffin exchanged a glance, a silent communication born of the deep bond they'd forged in their months of marriage. "Hope," Zara said. "Hope Madeline Callahan." Griffin smiled his approval. "Perfect." After ensuring mother and baby were stable, Dr. Turner and Hannah departed, promising to return the next day to check on them. Madeline was allowed in briefly to meet her niece, her usually composed demeanor dissolving into tears of joy as Griffin placed the baby in her arms. "She has the Callahan chin," Madeline declared, making them all laugh. "Stubborn already, I can tell." As evening settled over the cabin, the new family found themselves alone at last. Zara, freshly bathed and changed into a clean nightgown, reclined against pillows in their bed while Griffin sat beside her, still marveling at the tiny creature sleeping in the cradle he'd made with his own hands. "Are you disappointed?" Zara asked quietly. "That she's not a boy." Griffin looked at her in genuine surprise. "Why would I be disappointed? She's perfect." Some men prefer sons, Zara said. Especially for a first child. Griffin took her hand, bringing it to his lips. Zara Callahan, you have given me a beautiful, healthy daughter. A piece of your heart to love and protect. That is the greatest gift I could imagine. His green eyes, so often serious, danced with happiness. Besides, who says she can't learn to ride and rope as well as any boy? She's a Callahan, after all. Zara smiled, relaxing into the pillows. Yes, she is. Griffin's expression grew more solemn. I want you to know something. I meant what I said earlier. I am her pa in every way that matters. No one in this town will ever know she isn't mine by blood. Not from my lips, not from Maddie's, not from anyone who cares about us. I know, Zara said softly. That's who you are, Griff. A man who loves with his whole heart. As if sensing she was being discussed, little hope stirred in her cradle, her tiny face scrunching in preparation for a cry. Griffin reached for her before Zara could move, lifting the infant with careful hands. I think someone's hungry, he said, placing the baby in Zara's arms. Watching his wife nurse their daughter, Griffin felt a peace he'd never known before. The cabin around them, the home he'd built with his own hands, seemed to expand with the love filling it, becoming the sanctuary he'd always intended it to be. Later, as Zara slept and Griffin kept watch over his family, a knock sounded softly at the door. Puzzled by a visitor at such an hour, he eased from the bedroom and crossed to answer it. Sheriff Frank Tanner stood on the porch, his expression a mix of professional gravity and personal discomfort. Sorry to disturb you, Griff. Heard about the baby. Congratulations. Thank you, Griffin replied, stepping outside and closing the door behind him to avoid waking Zara. What brings you out here so late? Tanner sighed heavily. Got news I thought you should hear right away. Judge Davidson was found dead yesterday in a Denver hotel room. Apparent suicide, though the circumstances are questionable. Griffin absorbed this information silently. Since fleeing Silverhorn, Davidson had been a shadow hanging over their happiness, a threat they couldn't quite dismiss despite his absence. You're sure it's him? He asked finally. Tanner nodded. Positive identification. He left a letter confessing to ordering Madeline's abduction, among other crimes. Seems he knew the law was closing in on him. Relief and a complex mix of other emotions washed through Griffin. Does Maddie know? Not yet. Figured I'd tell you first, given everything. The sheriff hesitated. There's more. In his confession, Davidson mentioned Zara specifically, said he'd learned about her condition from a business associate in Billings, Edward Harrington. Griffin's hands clenched involuntarily at the name of the man who had abandoned Zara and their child. What about him? Nothing directly. Just that Davidson saw Zara as leverage in his ongoing attempt to acquire Maddie's property. Thought if he could control her, he could pressure Maddie. Bastard, Griffin muttered. Tanner nodded grimly. No argument there. Anyway, thought you should know. It's over, Griff. Davidson can't hurt your family anymore. Appreciate you bringing the news, Frank, Griffin said, extending his hand. And for everything you did during that time. The sheriff shook his hand firmly. That's what friends do. A rare smile crossed his weathered face. Now go back to your wife and daughter. Enjoy this time, it passes faster than you think. As Tanner rode away into the night, Griffin stood for a moment on the porch, letting the cool spring air wash over him. The threat that had lingered at the edges of their happiness was gone. Davidson would never again cast his shadow over Silverhorn Creek or the people Griffin loved. When he returned to the bedroom, he found Zara awake, hope cradled against her chest. Was that Frank? She asked softly. Griffin sat beside her on the bed, gently stroking their daughter's dark hair. Yes, he brought news. Judge Davidson is dead. Zara's eyes widened. Dead how? Griffin related what Tanner had told him, watching Zara process the information. "How do you feel about it?" he asked when he'd finished. "Relieved," she admitted. "And sad in a way, that a man could become so twisted by greed and power that he would hurt others so callously." She looked down at their sleeping daughter. "But mostly I'm grateful that Hope will grow up in a world without his threat hanging over us." Griffin leaned forward to press a gentle kiss to Zara's forehead, then one to Hope's tiny brow. "That's what matters now, our future, our family." In the months that followed, the Callahan family settled into a rhythm of everyday joys and challenges. Hope grew from a newborn into a chubby, laughing baby with her mother's eyes and what everyone in town agreed was definitely the Callahan determination. Griffin proved to be a natural father, as patient with middle-of-the-night wakings as he was with colicky evenings. Townspeople who remembered his stoic, somewhat solitary nature before Zara's arrival marveled at the transformation. The serious horseman now frequently rode through town with his daughter secured against his chest, proudly showing her off to anyone who would look. Zara thrived as well, dividing her time between motherhood and working at the mercantile when Madeline needed her. The store had become even more of a community gathering place, with a small corner dedicated to children's books and toys that Zara had convinced Madeline to stock. On a warm September afternoon, just over a year since Zara's arrival in Silverhorn Creek, the Callahans hosted a celebration at their cabin. Hope's first birthday coincided closely with their first wedding anniversary, and they'd decided to mark both occasions with friends and family. Tables set up in the yard groaned with food contributed by well-wishers. Mrs. Thornton had outdone herself with a birthday cake decorated with tiny sugar flowers. Children from town played games in the meadow while their parents socialized and cooed over the birthday girl. Resplendent in a dress Madeline had sewn specially for the occasion. Griffin found his wife standing slightly apart from the festivities, watching their daughter being doted on by Hannah Turner and several other women. "Penny for your thoughts, Mrs. Callahan," he said, slipping an arm around her waist. Zara leaned into his embrace with a contented sigh. "I was just thinking about how much has changed in a year, how blessed we are." "That we are," Griffin agreed, following her gaze to their daughter, who was attempting to stuff cake into Hannah's ear with single-minded determination. "Though I'm not sure Hannah would agree at this exact moment." Zara laughed, the sound as melodious to Griffin's ears as it had been the first time he'd heard it. "Hope certainly knows what she wants." "Like her mother," Griffin observed, pressing a kiss to Zara's temple. "And her father," she countered with a smile. A comfortable silence fell between them as they watched the celebration unfold. Sheriff Tanner was deep in conversation with Madeline, whose cheeks bore a suspicious hint of color. Dr. Turner supervised the children's games with good-natured enthusiasm. Miss Emerson, the schoolteacher, sat with several of the older women, already discussing Hope's eventual education as if preparing for a student of unusual promise. "They really do love her," Zara said softly. "All of them, just as they've accepted me." "Of course they do," Griffin replied. "She's a Callahan, and so are you." Zara turned in his arms, her expression suddenly serious. "Griff, there's something I need to tell you." A flicker of concern crossed his face. "What is it?" "Is something wrong?" "Not wrong," she assured him quickly. "Just unexpected." She took a deep breath, then said, "I'm pregnant." Griffin stared at her, momentarily speechless. "Pregnant? You're sure?" Zara nodded. "Hannah confirmed it yesterday. The baby should arrive in early spring." A slow, radiant smile spread across Griffin's face. "Another baby," he murmured, his hand moving instinctively to rest against her still flat stomach. "Hope will have a brother or sister." "You're happy then?" Zara asked, though his joy was unmistakable. Happy doesn't begin to cover it, Griffin said, his voice rough with emotion. I love hope with all my heart, Zara. You know that, but the thought of a child we created together. He shook his head, overwhelmed. It's a gift I never expected. Should we tell everyone? Zara asked, glancing toward their guests. Griffin considered this, then shook his head. Let's keep it between us for a little while. Something just for our family to cherish first. Zara nodded her agreement, understanding his desire to hold this precious knowledge close before sharing it with the world. I love you, Griffin Callahan, more every day. And I love you, Zara Callahan, he replied, bending to kiss her softly. You and Hope and this new little one are everything I never knew I needed. As if sensing she was being discussed, Hope chose that moment to let out a delighted squeal, drawing her parents' attention. She had escaped her admirers and was toddling determinedly toward Griffin and Zara, her face and dress smeared with cake but her smile radiant. Griffin swept her up as she reached them, lifting her high above his head to her squealing delight before settling her securely in his arms. There's my birthday girl, he said, his voice full of the unconditional love that had been evident from the first moment he'd held her. Looking at her husband and daughter, with the promise of their growing family warm within her, Zara felt a completeness she had once thought impossible. When she'd arrived in Silverhorn Creek, she'd been seeking only safety and anonymity, a place to raise her child away from judgment and shame. Instead, she'd found love, acceptance, and a man who had claimed both her and her child as his own without hesitation. The secret she had carried beneath her heart had led her to the one place, the one man, who could heal the wounds of her past and help her build a future filled with joy. As Hope reached out one sticky hand to pat her mother's cheek, Zara silently thanked whatever fate or providence had guided her steps to Silverhorn Creek and into Griffin Callahan's waiting arms. Their story, begun in desperation and uncertainty, would continue in love and hope for all the years to come.